All right, so today I'm going to be talking about my internship with Blue Door Group in Chapel Hill. Blue Door is a growth innovation agency for healthcare and life sciences companies, and together we've been working with a startup called Holistics Health, which is a platform that guides users through evidence-based and complementary medicines and therapies. So their goal is to provide evidence-based and patient-centered reviews of available integrative medical modalities, provide access to providers that are licensed in integrative modalities, and to provide unbiased recommendations on key considerations when selecting what products to buy. So Holistic's goal really resonated with me as someone who's experienced a lot of health issues growing up and who's often felt lost among the wealth of information on the internet. Helen, who is the founder of Holistics, noticed sort of a common theme in healthcare that outside of the healthcare setting, patients are pretty much on their own. Aside from the few times a year that they visit their providers, no one's really checking in with them. So are they following recommendations? Are they trying supplements, or are they just taking random advice off the internet? So together we're trying to answer the question, what are patients doing outside of the healthcare system? How are we tracking it? And how does it impact their overall health? The answer for most healthcare systems is we don't know. Our solution to this knowledge gap is the utilization of a lifelike chatbot platform that checks in with patients at home. So our first challenge was to find a chatbot platform that suited our needs. Blue Door owns a more rudimentary chatbot software called Sherp, but we wanted to see if a program existed on the market already that suited all of our product requirements. So our goals for an appropriate chatbot software were flexibility for programming conversations with multiple branches. For more realistic conversations, we want the users to be able to respond to the chatbot and then have the chatbot respond accordingly, as opposed to just having a generic answer for user responses. So for example, if a user responds that their sleep quality was really poor over the past week, we want to empathize with them before just moving on to our next question. But if a user responds that they slept really well, we want to congratulate them and potentially even ask if, one of our tips or conversations actually helped their sleep quality. We also wanted the software to have the ability to schedule and automate delivery of conversations to bulk groups of users, because as chatbot enrollment grows, we don't want to get stuck manually delivering conversations to individuals every single day. We want to be able to group users based on, potentially their enrollment date or specific user group, such as like cancer survivors versus maybe a cohort that has a certain type of insurance versus a group of patients from a specific healthcare system. And then we want to automatically deliver conversations to them at a specified frequency. We also wanted the ability to automate delivery of personalized conversations based off of previous answers. So for example, if a user tells us that she's already taking 5 milligrams of melatonin nightly, we don't want to suggest melatonin later on down the line. And we wanted it to be easy to use, set up, and program. So I mostly looked for code-free conversation development so that any team member could add conversations or edit conversations. And then arguably our most important requirement is the ability to deliver conversations via SMS message. We want the chatbot platform to be accessible to people of all backgrounds, and seeing as most people have cell phones, we figured that SMS would be the best option. So for my research, I discovered 19 viable options and documented their attributes on a spreadsheet. Here you can see the first 4. I have a couple different categories in the columns, including target market, framework, flexibility, cost, and so on. The most important category is the suitability score, which is an objective measure of how suitable the platform is for our specific project needs. We ended up narrowing the list down to 3 programs, Zingle, Quincy, and Landbot.io. We either demoed them with a company rep, or I used a free trial to create a demo for our team. I then presented all of my findings on the 3 programs to our team, but the programs were either too costly or they just didn't quite fit all of our needs. So we ended up making the decision to proceed with Chirp, which is that chatbot that Blue Door owns, and then just develop it and add on features as we need them. So the next step was to begin developing conversations in Sherp and prepare to pilot the program. We wanted to target 4 main areas of health for our users, including sleep, diet, physical activity, and mental health. The goal is to basically just guide users through the target areas while providing tips for healthy habits and also collecting patient information along the way. So for example, in 1 week, a user will have received 4 to 7 conversations containing tips on each of the 4 segments. And then at the end of the week, we send out a survey conversation that collects patient data. So say we send out 2 sleep tips, a diet tip, and a mental health tip in 1 week. Then in the survey, we'll ask how the user slept over the past week on a scale of 1 to 7, with 1 being poor sleep and 7 being great sleep. How their mental health has been on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being miserable and 5 feeling really great. And then how many servings of fruits and veggies they've consumed. And then we'll also ask a social determinants of health question. So for example, do you live alone or do you live with a spouse, partner, or family member? We might also ask which tip was the most helpful or which tips they were actually able to integrate into their daily routines. To date, I've developed about 50 conversations. All the conversations are logged into a master spreadsheet by category, along with a tip inventory for each category, the user journey, and a survey inventory. So here's an example of the sleep tip inventory spreadsheet at the top of the slide. The tips are ranked based off of their strength and importance, and they're listed by category. So here we can see all the sleep tips that are about light, and then they're linked to supporting evidence and or a product. So for example, if we recommend blue light blocking glasses in a tip, we can then link a user to a reliable pair on Amazon. I also use a website called Bitly to shorten the links so that they're more manageable when we send them out to the participants. And then the lower screenshot is the sleep tip conversation spreadsheet. So after I create a conversation in Sherp, I log it into these spreadsheets with the conversation ID, a link to the conversation's name, the category, and the content, and then I log any branches that a conversation may have. So on the back end, each conversation is developed via the text boxes shown in that screenshot on the left. If you want to save a user's answer, you'd create a variable name such as week1_rested, and then you'd enter it in that save as box under the conversation text. And then these responses can be exported into an Excel spreadsheet for analysis and for tracking a user's progress with their consent. Branching conversations can be linked via the multiple choice responses. So for example, in this screenshot, if the user answers no, they do not have a major chronic illness, it would then divert them to a different conversation as opposed to finishing this one, because this conversation goes on to ask the user to list their chronic illnesses. So branching conversations are basically another way of personalizing the conversations to the user. As I mentioned before, Sherp is not fully developed yet, so it comes with its own frustrations when I'm building out conversations. For example, it's difficult to edit the conversations once they're saved because you can't drag and drop those boxes around if you want to change the order of a conversation. You also can't insert a blank box in between 2 boxes if you want to add a few sentences or questions in between 2 boxes of text. But Sherp is still being developed, and often when we have major issues, they're addressed pretty quickly. So to send out conversations, you can see in the other screenshot that there's an invite tab where the user's name and cell phone number is entered along with the message box. So here I could type out a greeting and then paste the conversation link along with the unique conversation ID. Right now, conversations must be sent out individually, but we hope to add a feature to send conversations in bulk in the near future. We also created a user journey for each user, which just makes it easier to know what conversation to send each user on a certain day. Since Sherp lacks automation, this is all done manually, but we've tried to make it as easy as possible by adding the greeting and conversation link in one box under each day. So all we really need to do is look and see what day in the program a user is on, and then copy and paste it into the invite box that I showed you on the last slide. You can also see that our tips are color-coded by category and organized by user group. Our user journey has actually changed somewhat drastically since I took these screenshots, but the idea is still the same. We had initially planned to have our users rotate through each of the 4 segments. So we do sleep the first month, mind the second month, diet the third month, physical activity the fourth month, and then we'd filter through any additional tips in each segment after that. But we've since changed the program to integrate all 4 segments within the first few weeks. So that way, if a user doesn't really see any, sleep improvements, say in the first month, we're not just saying, oh, well, and then moving on to the next category, which would have been mind. We also had initially planned to group the users based off of their sleep score, as you can see in this screenshot. And the sleep score was that scale that I mentioned earlier from 1 to 7, ranking a user's sleep quality. So if a user had a low sleep score, they'd receive tips more often. And if a user had a higher sleep score, they'd receive fewer tips per week. And then this would rotate each week based on their updated score from the weekly survey. But instead, we decided to ask users in the beginning what frequency of tips they'd prefer, because some of the users might feel overwhelmed with getting a tip every day and feel like it's impossible to implement all of the tips and suggestions that we give them, but some may prefer to get those daily tips to keep them on track. So we just felt it was best to let the user decide at the beginning. Because Sherp is lacking many of the features from our initial requirements list, I started working on a product requirements document. The top screenshot shows what we'd like to do as user admins, and then what our users would like to see from the chatbot too. So for example, we'd like to be able to trigger conversations automatically based off a user's response, which means, say a user types in, I started taking melatonin last week. Sherp would be able to read the word melatonin and then trigger a conversation that would automatically ask what the dosage and frequency of melatonin use is. An example of the end user sentence would be, I don't want to repeat the same conversations or tips multiple times. These requests are then compiled into a user story, like on the lower screenshot, which has a feature name, story sentences, applicable role, and an additional explanation of the feature. The PRD is a living document that we edit and update as we run into problems while using Sherp, but it's taken a bit of a backseat as we move closer to beginning our pilot study. So as a side project, I worked with a group of other interns and internship advisors from both Blue Door and the Digital Health Institute for Transformation to create a digital health information technology database for local medium-sized healthcare systems. The database consists of 5 segments: text-based agents, telehealth solutions, remote care products, patient experience, and clinical decision support tools. We were each assigned a section to work on, and then we rotated sections until everything was complete. I was assigned the text-based agent section, but I also did a lot of work on remote care products and telehealth solutions. You can see in the screenshot that I broke each platform out into many different categories, such as security, level of AI, multilingual technology, live agent handover, and so on. I focused mainly on products and programs that were interoperable with the electronic health records, healthcare specific, HIPAA compliant, and allowed for code-free development. The screenshot shows the first 5 of the 11 products that I discovered and added to the database. One of the most interesting products I found was a symptom checker chatbot that can actually triage patients and direct them to a local provider or a telehealth visit. So this would be something that was especially useful in this era of COVID-19. So finally, I authored 2 articles that are posted on the Holistics Health website. If anyone is interested in the relationship between gut health and mood, or in CBD products and their effectiveness, you can go take a look. As someone with a science and technical background, I've always loved being able to research a topic and then put my findings into layman's terms for everyone to understand. So this was a fun little side project for me. The articles are posted under Helen's name because she has access to the website to publish them. So currently I'm finishing up the conversations and surveys for our first 2 weeks in the user journey. We're on track to pilot our chatbot to our first group of users sometime this week, which is really exciting. It's going to be great to see all of our hard work come to fruition. And I'm also really excited to see how the chatbot platform improves the health of patients over time via education and encouraging healthy habits. I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to work with Blue Door, Holistics, and DHIT, and I've definitely learned a lot of valuable lessons. The biggest lesson I'd have to say is that I've learned to roll with the punches. I am a very type A person, but when you're working with the startup, ideas are constantly flowing and plans often change. I often found myself building out conversations or starting to work on something and then completely redoing it when plans changed the next week. Even the information that I wrote up in my internship report is already outdated. But I learned to be more flexible, and I'm really grateful for that. I also gained market research experience, which is a type of research I had never conducted before. And I learned how to communicate with both large and small chatbot and other healthcare IT companies, and how to be firm when discussing our product requirements. Finally, I can't emphasize enough how much I appreciated working in a small team where I really felt my voice was heard. I felt very comfortable voicing my opinions and bringing new ideas to the table, and those opinions and ideas were very clearly respected by the team. I'm proud to say that my ideas were taken to heart, and many were implemented into the chatbot website or the pilot study plan. And I don't believe I would have been able to get this experience elsewhere. So thank you all for being here and for your time today. Does anyone have any questions?